Hello, Matthias.
Hello, hi there.
You're starting in October with brand new seminars in English. Mainly topic is alchemy, and I feel we need to make some introduction to this field.
Yes, thank you for pointing that. I think on the first sight, it may be quite curious. Why do I introduce alchemy in connection to cosmology or psychological astrology and psychoanalysis? Well, there is a basic mystery of how life proceeds, goes on from one form to another. And when we look at astrology or symbolic cosmology, as I prefer to call it, it's a rather static, relatively static description of life and its processes, of what is happening in life and what life wants from us, etc. So in alchemy, we have a dynamic, poetic approach to the archetypes on one hand, and human development as individuals on the other. So when we include alchemy into astrological, i.e. cosmological and psychoanalytic exploration, we hopefully become dynamic, which means we start to move from the unknown to the known, from unconsciousness to self-knowledge. Yeah. So paradoxically, by going a little bit deeper into the alchemical knowledge, we hope for being enriched, inspired, and as well energized and encouraged to do our very astrology and psychoanalysis, or symbolic cosmology and psychoanalytic work upon ourselves.
When did you came in touch with alchemy?
Oh,
Was it during studies in Jungian psychology?
Oh, it was long before. I was fascinated when my very beloved mentor, Liz Green, she gave a seminar on alchemy in 1992. And I said, well, this is something really interesting. So I went to Watkins bookshop in London and looked for alchemy. Of course, Jung, Psychology and Alchemy was my first book on alchemy. And since then, it's been really, I understood nothing about alchemy, absolutely nothing for the first decade or so. And I was at that time working quite painstakingly in my own analysis. And I had no idea what this is about, but it was such a profound mystery that not only inspired me, but gave me so much comfort in times of stress, when I didn't know what to do, even in times of depression. You know, in the first years of psychoanalytic work upon yourself, you get depressed, and so you have to wait. You have to unravel what happens in your life with the help of your dreams. And of course, I was quite lucky because my analyst, she also understood astrology. So we could talk about the archetypes as they are revealed from the astrological chart, or cosmogram, as I call it.
Mm-hmm. In Slovenia, you had a group of alchemy for 10 years. Did it start in 2010 or before?
I think it was just when Pluto went into Capricorn. So it was 2008-9. We started in 2009.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was a change. You know, we hoped to, that was a change in perspective and a point of unification for me of psychological astrology and Jungian way proper, like Jungian training. Jungian trainings usually do not involve psychological astrology. Well, for me, it was like, it is one science. And it made me realize that alchemy is the connecting point. Alchemy, actually, it is with alchemy, with the alchemical symbolism, with the images, with working with active imagination. It is where you can actually come together and link what I want to give a little talk today, later on, to link, for example, or quite basically, not for example, astrological planets, that is cosmological agents, the very basic cosmological agents or archetypes of the planets that we use in astrology, with the way we can understand our development, transformation, and of course, the attainment of life goals that we set up. It's our goal, our goals in life that we want to attain with working upon ourselves psychoanalytically or with psychological astrology. So alchemy became, for me and for the group, which took 10 years to complete the journey through Jung's collected work number 14, Mysterium Conjunctionis, to understand and contain the process of inner and outer change of man.
Mm-hmm. Around the same time, you wrote a book, Psychoanalytic Alchemy, Symbols of Transformation. And this book was available only in Slovenian language till now.
Well,
and
it is being translated, Alenka. Thanks
yeah,
to
I know.
You worked very hard,
Mm-hmm.
so to say, to persuade me to do that. So I ventured on and started to translate chapter by chapter. And we are going to give this sample translation on our website, Antwi, for the participants of our new series of seminars, but also it will be available to a wider public. Just, you don't have to go to a seminar to read those texts, which came out after so many years of research of alchemy, psychological astrology, and Jungian analysis.
So in this first chapter, you talk about how planets are connected with alchemy, or what?
Yes. Oh, what? Yes, I will. I will
You will talk something about that today as well, like
yes, I would
introduction.
like to give something, just as a sample, as some kind of a introduction to our work online, which also has had some history, not only in Alchemy Group in Slovenia, but also with the Faculty of Astrological Study, where I started to teach 4 years ago. And I was giving seminars at the faculty summer school in Oxford in August each year. And I felt I could go on with this series as a sort of a continuation of different venture of my work with groups in different countries, which is of course Slovenia primarily, where I happily reside and I always happily return to. But also I worked with groups for 6 years in Serbia, for 6 years in Hungary, for 6 years with Draganov and the Mortal Illich in Ghent, Belgium, and now for almost 5 years in Russia. So hopefully a group will be formed. These things have will of their own. So we will see if a group is going to be formed internationally. It is not necessarily, it does not have to be a big group. It has to be, it's just, the idea is to create a group which is international so that we can study together, but also work together with IPAL method.
Mm-hmm.
You know, IPAL
Okay.
method is a combination of these techniques.
Alchemical processes are usually connected with suffering.
Yes,
Yeah, but
we are
they have a purpose. What's this purpose?
You know, ideally, we would like to think about an alchemical process to lead to a result. And I think, Alenka, we are a very good example how we worked very hard for the past few months to organize these seminars, not only in terms of inviting people, but the majority of the work was behind the scene. We worked on the technical issues a lot, especially in the last month with Mercury retrograde in Virgo, and so many practical details went wrong and demanded attention, and it was a lot of fighting with this thing that alchemy called the prima materia. And I'm going to talk about this phenomenon that alchemists named prima materia in connection to astrological planets. And of course, I have to mention Venus, because Venus retrograde in Leo is the queen of this year, because she took us to the underworld during the summer, and we were all faced with enormous fears about how we are going to proceed and how are we going to do our individuation, how are we going to live our life. It changed our lives according to the house where this retrograde Venus was transiting during the summer. And if you look carefully at what it means, what it actually did to you, particularly in connection to the affairs and activities and the area of life represented by that cosmological house, you will see that it wanted to change your not only perspective, but also the very worth of what life is in connection to that area. For example, I will give a personal example. My mother recently died in March, and then Venus was starting to move to my 8th house and then went retrograde in that 8th house. And I thought, well, you know, this inheritance, I'll sort it out very easily along with my sister, and we'll just make it through. But there was so much work. We had to face enormous fears in ourselves. How are we going to do it? How are we going to do with the house and everything? And sorting the house out, the finances and all that, and still waiting for the probate to occur. And it was a very strong psychological process of transformation for both my sister and me. And of course, this retrograde Venus in Leo was retrograding my 8th house. And now I understand, you know, I knew it theoretically why the inheritance is in the 8th house, but it really cooks you in a very, very alchemical way, in ways you will never think, you would never think it is possible. It's a completely new experience. So have a look, just give you a tip. Have a look at that house, what's happened to you in this year. And Venus is now coming out of the underworld, as Melanie Reinhardt beautifully put in her lecture 2 years ago at the faculty summer school, where she said how important, Venus is to come out of the underworld, and she comes out with the demons because she visited the demons, and it's a new Venus. It's a new way how we have to look at the worth of life, and of course life itself. I will say she decides, because she's bearing life, she's giving life all the time. So life is deciding, life has the will, and life has the alchemy for us. And this alchemy is contained in the processes that we experience, but astrological planets are the pathways, are the archetypal tracks that help us not only understand, but to orient ourselves in that respect. So unless I saw that, as long as my cogito, say my eye, my cogito, my looking, did not see, did not perceive that Venus retrograde in the 8th, I was not able to understand in such a complete and spiritual way why I have so much work connected to this inheritance, and of course to my relationship with my older sister, with my Saturn in 3rd, and how this is changing profoundly both of us. Just to give you a very vivid and practical example.
Mm-hmm. So should I give you now
word?
Yeah.
Give me word to present something.
Word, time, space.
Okay, I will try to.
Okay, let's start with how should we call your presentation?
It's an introduction. I'll share I have a modest PowerPoint presentation for this introduction, and I'm going to share it now. And
Okay.
Where is it? I thought it, with alchemy, you always have this sudden defenses of the prima materia, of the material on the stove. So things may disappear or, So can you see my presentation?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so I'll just put the, so I named this, you see my presentation, Alenka?
Yes, I see.
Just an introduction to the series of seminars, just to show you how we could work with alchemy in conjunction with psychological astrology or cosmology and psychoanalysis. So when we are launching this new series of seminars, we are at the same time experiencing some new energy. And, we are not quite strong yet because Mercury was retrograde, Venus was retrograde,
They are both in the shadow period right now, yeah?
Yeah, some astrologers call it shadow path until they reach the position where they come on the degree which they initially started to go retrograde at. So that would be 21 Virgo with Mercury. Mercury coming out of the what is known as shadow on this Saturday, and Venus the 28th of Leo, which is going to happen a week after. So Venus has a very long testing time in her shadow, path of the shadow, coming out of the underworld, and she's been direct for more than 3 weeks now, but she's still in that path that makes you really work on yourself, work upon yourself in that area of life, not yet knowing fully. You may have a hunch, and you should not lose your trust, but you do not know what in reality is going to happen. How is it going to come to fruition when Shik finally comes on the 28th of Leo, which is the day of our first seminar in this series.
Interesting.
Well, some call it synchronicity. You know, the thing
Right.
about synchronicity is, said somebody, but you know, certainly synchronicity happens if you see it. If you don't see it, you lose it, and you never have it. So synchronicity is quite a subjective experience, and it's an archetypal point of conjunction between the psyche and the spirit. You wanted to say something?
We didn't check charts when we pick up dates, yeah?
Yes, I realized that only later. I guess when we set up these seminars in April, I somehow forgot to look at the chart, but the chart has a strong moon, of course, and a strong moon in Cancer with opposition to Pluto, which is quite necessary for alchemy. Pluto is the planet of alchemy. And I think we're going to have some texts on Pluto soon, Alenka.
Yeah, this is Pluto is going to be the first book published on Amazon in English language. Hopefully in November.
In Scorpio time. So, but hopefully you are going to make available some passages of the book on our website, won't you?
I don't know yet.
Please do, because, you know, I think it's so important, you know, for sharing it, you know, just at least, you know, a sample or a chapter. Think about it.
Okay.
So what you want to address today in this introductory presentation of our presentation to our series of online seminars is the prima materia, and prima materia was the starting substance in alchemies, so to speak, all over the world, because alchemy is known as was an art in every human society we know. And this was just the basic material that an alchemist started to cook. And if you think of what prima materia is, it's so obvious that prima materia is what we are. You know, we want to have order or cosmos on our conscious level, yet our life is full of chaos, of prima materia. So you may like to think about prima materia as the very chaos, as the very starting point where you say, okay, I've had enough. I want to venture and do some work upon myself, so some order can be done in my life, and hopefully my life gets better and I may be more able to come to a position where I can hope to attain my goals in life. So planets, which were always and also a part of alchemy beside the sheer cooking procedures, were always there. Alchemists work with planets, yet in a slightly different way than in a traditional astrology. They tried to depict them, because alchemy is all about images, and planets can be very useful because they are archetypes. Yeah, they are there are narratives in mythology in all cultures which are very planetary, so to speak. So we find planetary threads, which are archetypal threads, and they come differently in different cultures, but they are inevitably, Mars is always Mars, Venus is always Venus. And the solar gods, they're always solar gods, like Apollo or Helios. Yet they come out differently in different cultures, and they also come out in alchemy. So in distinction to alchemy, astrological planets are tracks that are quite reliable, because a track or a trajectory of an archetype is a certain thing. It naturally and inevitably is leading to a certain development. Of course, we may not know the actual concrete result, but we do know the archetypal track. For example, with Saturn, we have an old king, a dictator, a dictatorship, and a golden age where all needs of people are satisfied. Yet nobody should evolve. You shouldn't be individuals. You should be whatever the system wants from you. If we say no cash, it means no cash. If we say vaccine, it's everybody vaccine. So this is just the most obvious examples, but that's the old king. And the archetype of the old king of Saturn inevitably comes to an end. He's inevitably overthrown by his son, and the world comes to a different, maybe more democratic rule. Of course, the old king is then again reborn, and so we have an interplay of Saturn and Jupiter as we go along, as society progresses. So this is an example of an archetypal trajectory that will inevitably happen on both collective and individual levels. And so planets in alchemy are really useful in order to understand, the very chaotic nature of prima materia, or if we put it into a human perspective, into our very emotional states that we experience especially powerfully during our lifetime, during our life transitions. Now, what is also important, the second point I want to stress in the introduction of our series of online seminars, is the historical perspective, which is essentially a new era perspective. And with new era, new era was the discovery of a new continent, not only in geography with Columbus, but also it was also a new era and with heliocentricity, and then no heliocentricity, we are no longer heliocentric. There is no center known to the universe, but this new continent was also in philosophy, and philosophy is really how we think willy-nilly, either wantingly or non-wantingly. We have perspectives on life, which is philosophy, and we may not be aware how philosophy influences our lives. And so in philosophy, it was the cogito. It is not only I think, but also I feel, I sense, I intuit. Originally by Descartes, it was I think, but who is that thinks? That's the ego. So the ego, the emergence of that was a new continent. It was not cogito, but the ego. So ego, there was no ego before in history. I would need more time to explain this, but the very birth of the ego made a new perspective on alchemy. And so alchemy was divided, like astrology and also other sciences, into subject and object area. So object area went to chemistry. So chemical sister of alchemy was trying to be, or has been trying to be, independent from the spiritual psychological dimension of alchemy, which is only perceived by your ego or your cogito. So the new center of the universe in the new era, in the beginning of the age of Aquarius, was no longer Earth or Sun or another galaxy, but man himself or herself. So that's the very perspective we want to put our work, because we work upon ourselves as man or woman, as an individual, and we use alchemical processes as working upon ourselves. Now, this is something that before the new era was not separated, because alchemists in the old era and in the Middle Ages, they were working on prima materia both and simultaneously in themselves and the world, and the broth on the stove, which they literally cooked, and then they were writing texts at the same time, and also doing active imagination and working in pairs simultaneously. So naturally, now for us, it is naturally, because that we work with a person, with ourselves, with our fellow men, or in the group, and we want to change ourselves. We want to facilitate the inner and outer change of man. Yet this was not something so specifically stated or seen in the history of alchemy. So the very purpose is self-knowledge. That's quite clear. We pursue any work upon ourselves with psychological astrology or psychoanalysis or counseling, I don't know what, it's self-knowledge, okay? So it's about how you change the perception, your cogito, your perception of how you see yourself, and how you suddenly understand not only the sense, but also the meaning of your life. And the meaning of your life, the meaning of life occurrences happens with understanding of what I call the intuitive cogito and the archetypal elements that are represented by planets. So astrological or cosmological planets, they are used as machines, to put it very graphically and technically, how to transform your difficult state of prima materia, i.e., the unresolved state of your emotional state of anxiety, maybe even despair, depression, self-doubt, loss of meaning, maybe even hatred or excessive infatuation with somebody or with something. Also, with alchemy, it can happen, as it did to me. And how you transform this phenomenon into something that you will be able to understand, use, and keep, yeah, as your knowledge.
Alchemists in Middle Ages worked in secret.
Well, it was dangerous times, and now again we are entering more dangerous times, and even now you cannot speak about alchemy. Now it is a problem, because it collides with the dominant world view, which is scientific, whereas in the Middle Ages it collided, or it was another path of work of life opposed to the collective spirituality, which was the church. So alchemists had to be careful, along with astrologers, and they were often the same, though not always, about the church. about the church authorities not to offend the collective, the very collective way of pursuing spirituality. So they had to be careful. Now, following these functions of alchemy, we need to understand the purpose or the function of alchemical images, because alchemical images, they're quite specific, they're quite fantastic. Yet this is how our psychic or psychical nature works. It produces images, they may not necessarily exist in the very physical nature. And I will give you an example. For example, a dragon cannot be found in the woods of England, Slovenia, or Russia, yet it is quite a regular image of our psychic landscape, not only in alchemy, but also in dreams and active imagination. So this dragon, is a horrible creature. Makes so.
Matthias, we have some dragons in Ljubljana.
Yeah, of course we do. Yeah.
Statues.
They are all over, and there's a dragon bridge and all that. But nobody has seen an alive dragon unless in your psychic landscape. So they are alive. They may not be physically, bodily alive, but that's not the only dimension of life. So alchemy touches upon a very subtle and very important dimension of man, which is psychic and spiritual, both psychic and spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
So by evoking these images, by touching the images, on one hand, in the alchemical rebuses and engravings, but much more powerful are the personal images that you have developed yourself in your own dreams or your own piece of active imagination, because it is yours. It is your psychic tissue. It is you as a psyche. So it's your own image. So when you tell your own image to another person, you actually reveal a part of yourself. It's your psyche. That's very important. Of course, there are archetypal elements which are common to all of us, and this is why we may be able to help each other when we work with alchemy, active imagination, and psychic images in general, also from dreams, because we have the common ground, because I'm also a collective man. I'm not just an individual, but I'm also a collective. I'm a collective as well. So that's a paradox, but it's very important to think about this archetypal dimension, which is collective. I don't call it collective unconscious, and this is where I disagree with Jung, because it is not the unconscious. The archetypal images, they are not unconscious. They are spiritual realm, and they are neither conscious nor unconscious. It's a different dimension. And maybe Jung divided that because he needed the model. He wanted to be a psychologist and seen as a psychologist. I can understand him. But if we look at these four dimensions, body, psyche, spirit, and mind, the archetypes come into the spirit dimension. And spirit dimension is not divisible into conscious and unconscious. It informs, to me, both the unconscious and also the conscious mind, because you recognize them consciously, and they're still archetypes, and they are individual, not only collective, because they rule your individuation, or they explain the tracks according to which your very individuation process, the process of becoming you as an unrepeatable, special person, develop. And this is very individual. It's represented by your cosmogram or your birth chart. to put it in traditional terms. So it's your archetypal pattern that is very individual, and that it says about your individuation process, and it's not collective because it's so profoundly individual. It is so much about your own matrix of becoming who you are. Now, the role of active imagination in alchemy is obvious, the reasons I just explained. So you want to work with images that come from your unconscious, from your psychic, of course, psychic unconscious. There is no other unconscious than psychic unconscious, so psychological, not psychological, because this is about logos, the psyche, about understanding the psyche, but psychical. And they are your or mine or everybody's individual treasure. And why do I say individual? Because they relate to our historicity. We are all conditioned by our past, by our childhood, and we have stored different memories connected to particular images that we can unravel, that we can decipher when we work with them. Now, in the following, I'm going to give you a short just overview of planets in alchemy, just to give you an idea of what planets are and how are they depicted. And I will start with Earth. Earth is the most important planet, and alchemy, and along with astrology, which were the queen formed together. Queen of science was a very motherly, earthly perspective. And, you know, out of the earthly creatures like Amalthea, Zeus, sacred Amalthea, and the twins, Romulus and Remus, founded. You know, they were breastfed by the lupus romana, or Roman she-wolf, and they gave rise to Rome, and Zeus overcame the old tyrant. And yet can you see my pointer? Is it visible?
The first one?
No, can you see Mishko?
No, just mine.
You can't see but so you have to rely on what I'm saying. I'm trying to point with this little thing on the on the screen.
I don't see it.
Sorry. So you can even see how breasts are emphasized of the earth, and we have here
No. Just you are using the wrong projection. I don't see. I'm still on the first picture.
I don't know why. Well, I'll stop sharing, and I'll try to. I think there is a technical trick with all this. But so you didn't see the image I was talking about Zeus, no. Romulus and Remus. Now I'll try to share it again. Now, can you see this?
Yeah.
Earth, right?
Okay. Yeah.
I will make it. Can you see it now? Can you see the image?
Still the same.
The Earth,
still the
right?
same.
The Earth.
Yes.
Okay, so it's Earth, you see, and how she breastfeeds the child of philosophers, as he was called. It's a creation of a new child in the Earth. And the Earth has many meanings in this image, also as a planet. We do not normally use it in astrology or cosmology, but we do use it as an element, right? And we use Earth as something to to earth, something to connect to earth, to manifest something. And so
can we call it nature as well?
We could call it nature, although not in this respect. She's more in her motherly, specifically in her motherly nature aspect. Okay, we could call it like Mother Nature. She's and you know the parable or comparison alchemists give to the earth was because on one hand she was the mother of the metals, because she was nursing the ores of the metals that are connected with planets, of the gold ore or silver ore, and the metals were sacred to alchemists because planets were sacred, we could say, because they represented pure archetype, pure spiritual force. And so in a way, Earth is the mother of all alchemical opus, both in nature and in man. And in terms of working upon ourselves, we like to work in pairs or in a group. So this earth becomes a mother of our own new life, of our own new personality created when we patiently work upon ourselves. Now I will show you, and I think I have to go out for some reason and show you the next. And Alenka, you mentioned nature, and I'm going to show you some image of nature. That can you see another image here?
Mm-hmm.
Is it full screen now?
No.
Okay, it's still in the PowerPoint projection, right?
Mm-hmm.
So here we have an alchemist who is following nature in her footprints, you see. And so he has, alchemy was really seen as a way of nature on one hand, which is a very important way to see nature, to see alchemy as a following nature, following in the footpath of your nature, or following nature. Understand your nature meant to follow the nature, and you had to enlighten yourself with the footpaths, with the footprints, I guess is the expression, to follow the nature. So it was about the nature. You have to go after your nature. You have to understand your nature. And this is what the psychic images that we get that we can obtain with the active imagination or with dream images, they actually reveal our nature, because they also are very informative about our past. So the alchemist has to follow nature. Yet there was another perspective. This is a very contradictory dimension of alchemy, because they also said, on the other hand, that we work against the nature, right? So it's also opus contra naturam, which meant work against nature. You had to follow the nature, but on the other hand, it was also against nature. What they mean by this? Do you have any idea, Alenka? Do we have to work against our nature sometimes?
Yes.
For example, we can be very angry, and that's really natural, because it comes natural and spontaneous. Yet sometimes we don't want to act on that anger, for example, on that martial expression. It can be very archetypal anger, right? Especially like rage, it's a raw archetypal power. And if we contain this archetypal power, this is against nature. So we are again to the planet Earth, or the Earth as an element. We want to contain our dragon, our little dragon, and he cannot shout with no control. he has to be controlled and contained. So, and this is an example how you work with your Mars, with your dragon. You work essentially against your natural way of responding, for example.
So this is when the process of transformation begins.
That's
when you
right.
go against your nature.
That's right. That's so important. And then what we can do, if you have like violent outbursts of anger, if you experience them, you can look at Mars, at the very position of your Mars in the cosmogram, in your birth chart, and you see what house, what aspect, what sign. As Charles Harvey, I hosted him many times in Slovenia in the 90s, gave seminars for us in Slovenia. He said the archetype, the archetypal sign, it's the archetype of Mars, by which, and he said in a very Platonic fashion, he said, by which archetype is your Mars informed? And that's really important to understand. So I really deeply meditated on that. He was very right. So he said, like Plato, like we are informed by the very ideas, like archetypes, meaning archetypes that, and what I call archetypal tracks that inform us. Of course, they inform us. They even capture us, and you have a fiery Mars. It just wants to go on and on and on. And it is only with your wheel of consciousness, which is not an archetype, that you can capture and encapsulate this little dragon so he can shout no more. So, and then he can be transformed. And this is what we usually can do in relationships, in working in pairs, in therapy, in counseling, and of course, in a group, and of course, in our seminars that are starting in 2 weeks. Oh gosh, I feel so excited and also a little bit anxious, I must admit. I want to share next. No, it's not in 2 weeks. It's in 10 days, actually, Alenka. 11 days. Now, if you look at this image, which is quite famous alchemical image, sun and moon, you can see an alchemist pointing to the fire between sun and moon, and the whole alchemy has been about transformation. You could also say a conjunction between sun and moon. So, and you can see the sun and the moon as basic pair of opposites, consciousness, unconscious, man, woman, day, night, passive, active, and so on. So all these pairs of opposites first need to be separated, and then they have to be conjunct. So alchemy is really about process between sun and moon. So on one hand, it's your astrological sun and astrological moon in your cosmogram, in your birth charts, but it's also about all other opposites that happen to be working in your life, like between intuition and sensation, then mind, then rational mind and feeling mind, emotional mind, and so on. I have to do it this way because it's
This fire, we can describe it like chemical reaction.
hopefully.
A chemical process, like chemical reaction.
Indeed, we all hope for transformation. We all hope that something new grows out of ourselves as we work, as we work upon ourselves. And So I think we have a new opportunity with this group to work on a, on a sort of both of an enclosed way, but also, an international group is really, is really like a world in a small bottle coming together, which is very important, like the Earth in alchemy, or Earth as a planet. We need to work together. Now, here you have again sun, and can you see the image, Linka?
Yes, I can. Sun as a male and moon as a woman.
Yes, and
Active
yes,
and passive principle.
yes, it's what is wonderful about alchemy is that we have figures which are human-like for planets. And I think that's really astounding, because we don't normally think about planets as figures, as human figures. But for example, in India, it's more common. Indian astrology is depicting planets more as figures. And if you think of them as figures, they can be, albeit archetypal figures, but they are figures. They're figures like we find them in Greek or any other mythology. And what they are doing something to each other. You see?
Yeah.
And their connection is with left hand and right hand. So they are cooperating always. So when you think about these images, you will reflect upon them. You will see that that planets, they are not really separated in our charts. They're always connected. You see, the sun is looking for the moon for her.
Are these aspects?
Not necessarily, but like, your sun will always be looking for your moon for embodiment. It is through the moon that your meaning of life can be embodied, right? So this is an example. It doesn't matter if you have an astrological aspect or not, but this alchemical view of the planets would mean that you need the moon in order for your sun potential, for your potential for individuality, be realized, embodied, expressed in relationships, and then also consummated, of course, because the moon is also about consummation of life. On the other hand, the moon looks for the sun because she needs energy, because she needs spiritual force for her cycles of regeneration and growth to occur in the first place. So they are much more interconnected. Any planet is much more interconnected with another than we usually think when we look technically in the cosmogram and try to think about planets as different spiritual forces of both our collective and individual lives. I'll just show you a few more, and then we will round this up. I think we've been going on for 1 hour. No?
Mm-hmm.
Is this what you wanted, Alenka? This is what you suggested we do.
Yeah, but we came to sun and moon. What about other planets?
Yeah. Now, other planets, they are more implicit, but maybe this image, do you see this image of the planetary chorus of a planetary cycle, so to speak? You can see, they also have the sun, and then on the left and then on the right you have the moon, and then Jupiter and Mars. But the main actors here, or the main figures on the stage here, are Mercury and Saturn. So Mercury is above, is in the heaven, and he was always the spirit, but he's connected with the court, with Saturn, who is at the roots of the tree. See this? You could see this as a tree of life, tree as a personification, as a, not personification, but an image of life. Yeah, we all have roots. We have the trunk, yeah, and then we also have the upper part of the tree as our personality. And, it's been ruled by Mercury and Saturn. Well, you should know that alchemy was not created in the time of transpersonal planets. So Mercury also contains the transpersonal planets, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, could be Chiron as well, in relation to Saturn, who sits at the root, at the root of matter. So whatever is the matter, it is Saturn. It is the cross that has a anchor, cross with an anchor. So Saturn is the archetype of us being anchored in life. But we need this chap up there, the spirit, the guide of the spirit. You can see his caduceus, two snakes being intertwined around his staff, the caduceus, and his flying sandals and his flying helmet. So he's quite volatile and was also described as dangerous in alchemy. And this is not what we usually think about Mercury in astrology or cosmology. Yet, you must understand it's also Uranic, Plutonic, and Neptunian in his very character. And to see those planets, Mercury, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, Chiron, all in opposition to Saturn, now makes sense, because Saturn is the principle or the archetype, or our ability, or our urge, or our need to materialize something, to bring it to materialization, to realization, both material and thinking realization, about the transpersonal forces of transpersonal planets, Mercury and Chiron. So that's also an example of how astrological planets, they become quite different, and we may think about them in a new way, which is very useful for working on ourselves, both in psychological astrology and psychoanalysis. And I have, I think, I want to show you this one. Can you see this coffin? They just opened the coffin. Oh, look what they found. They found a new king in the coffin, right? So when they put him...
It looked like the old one, actually.
Yeah, but he's renewed. He's a new king. He's different from the old one. Then they put in a coffin, but they opened it after some work that the alchemists did on the court, because alchemists worked in the court in a workshop. And after a while, it was a synchronistic event happening in the coffin. I opened the coffin because they heard some rumble, and the king was alive. Yeah, the king is dead. Long live the king! And they're all surprised. He's up and well again.
This is actually Plutonian process of death and transformation.
And rebirth.
Yes, it is rebirth. And
aren't we all kings? Like Jesus, he was a king, but we're not Jesus, but we are kings. We live even longer. We live even after God deserts us. So Jesus died after when God deserted him, and then he went to heaven. But Jung showed this very beautifully in his Red Book. We have to live on after we die on the cross, after life crucifies us, then we have to live quite unfamously our own individual lives without God. And then we have to create a new God. But that's a topic for another thing. And I think I have this. We should not leave our presentation of prima materia and the astrological planets without this one. Now is it here? Yeah, the Mercurial fountain. Rosarium Philosophorum, Mercurial fountain. If you look, we have sun and the moon again. And then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stars on the here down on the lower ring of the fountain. 6 stars. So where is the 7th? The 7th is the Mercury. As the fountain, Mercury, the water that doesn't make the hands wet, which is the parable of the quicksilver, which is the liquid metal of Mercury, and the mercurial water, the water that does not make hands wet, is the water we want to have when we work upon ourselves. It's about processing, it's the alchemical water, and it's Mercury. You see, it's the water of emotions, it's a water of sharing, it's a water of connection. It's all that, something that we also want to do in our seminars, to connect with each other and to share, hopefully made our processes liquid, meaning they can transform and we can hope for some new self-knowledge and personal transformation in order to enhance our quality of life and attain some life goals that we have set up individually for ourselves.
I'm thinking about conjunction. There are 2 types of conjunctions. One leads to suffering and the other leads to happiness.
So thank you. This was the presentation for the prima materia and the astrological planets. But you asked me a question about, the Edinger, I think he speaks about the lesser and the greater conjunctio between sun and moon. Yes, it's a division of, when something succeeds and when something does not succeed because it was premature. So we want to do something. We all experience failures, and sometimes things do not happen. A child is aborted. Our pursuits are not met with expectations. The results are not there. And alchemists knew about this quite often. So we have to dismantle the whole thing and start anew. Maybe find a new therapist, a new group, a new way of working upon ourselves, a new personal relationship, a new teacher. And this is also a part of the alchemical process. So there is no guarantee. We may not succeed. But, with earnest heart and with sincere intentions, we may get there eventually. Are we rounding this up?
Yeah, we can. So we can invite people to join you on the seminar on 7th October.
But Alenka, you will also be there, won't you?
Yeah, it's like today.
So when the participants apply, they will get an email from you, right? With the Zoom link. Is this how it works?
Yes.
Okay. And the website now works
Yeah.
after we worked so much on it.
Yeah. And we will give them the first chapter of
The first
Alchemy.
chapel. That's so
Yeah,
lovely. The chapel. It's our chapel, isn't
chapter.
it? Yeah.
Yeah, of the psychoanalytical alchemy.
Yes, I have translated one chapter on what I have just been talking about for you. So you will receive this text. And then you will also receive other texts each month as we progress through the series of the seminars.
Okay.
But there is also, I heard you told me yesterday that you have another surprise, quite plutonic in nature.
Which one again?
It was something on Pluto, no? You said you have something, have a text on Pluto?
Yes. For the bundle of 10 seminars, we will add a book of Pluto.
Well, extra of charge.
Yes.
Oh, that's generous. I like that.
Yeah, but they will receive it when it's published.
So when will that be, you think?
It would be to be in November when the Scorpio rules.
You mentioned that. Okay. With Sun in Scorpio, right?
Yeah. So
Okay.
with luck, perhaps for the second seminar in series, it will be done.
Or maybe the third, the second is
We'll see.
Okay.
We will
Don't
see.
promise too much.
So let's
Okay,
finish
thank
for
you,
today.
Alenka, for leading me through this presentation.
Yes, I
And
know. I asked you yesterday and you did it today, so thank you.
well, I did it with my heart and pleasure.
Bye.
Bye. See you everybody soon. We'll have a super time together.